Good afternoon and welcome to today's Mayor Knazio Advanced Nuclear State Collaborative webinar on nuclear power plant uprates. First of all, we'd like to give a big thanks to the DOE Office of Nuclear for their support of the ANSC and DOE New York Nuclear Partnership and all of their support with today's webinars. But it looks like you are on with your speaker. That's great. So next slide, please, Kelsey. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. First of all, if you have any questions during the webinar, there is a chat box at the bottom. Please feel free to post any questions throughout the panels. We are going to answer as many of the audience questions as we can after the presentations today. And then finally, we will be recording this webinar and sharing slides after this presentation. So if that's of interest to you, please just keep an eye out for that recording later this week or next week. And then with that, I'd like to transition into introducing today's moderator, Alyse. So Alyse is the Senior Advisor for the Nuclear Coordination and Radioactive Waste Policy at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, also known as NYSERDA. She's the state representative to the National Low-Level Radiation Waste Task Forum, Waste Forum, on which she's had several leadership roles while there. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and she's also a licensed professional engineer. And then finally, Alyse is also serving as an ANSC co-chair. So in that capacity, she helps provide additional feedback and support with moderating things like that for Advanced Nuclear State Collaborative activities. So Alyse, we really appreciate you being here today. And with that, I'll pass things off to you.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We appear to have, about 60 people attending. I'm really glad to see we have such a great turnout. I will keep this introduction very brief so that we can have plenty of time with our speakers and to engage in Q&A. Nuclear power plant uprates have a really long history with the first having been granted by NRC, oh gosh, more than 4 decades ago. From a New York State perspective, the process is really pretty similar to other amendments to the nuclear plant's operating licenses. Our state review focuses on plant safety and reliability, and we engage directly with both the utilities and with the NRC through NRC's state consultation process. Here in New York, we've been through the power uprate process at least once with each of our 4 currently operating nuclear plants, but the last time was way back in 2011. So I'm really looking forward to today's presentations, both as a refresher for myself and also to learn what new avenues utilities might be pursuing to increase the generating capacity of their existing plants. We do have 3 speakers today. First, we're going to be hearing from Chris Weigand from EPRI. He is a senior technical executive in the nuclear sector at the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI. Chris joined EPRI in 2013, bringing more than 26 years of diversified experience within the nuclear utility industry. Chris received a bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering from Purdue University. He was a senior reactor operator licensed from the NRC while at Braidwood Station, and he holds a professional engineering license in Illinois. After Chris, we will be hearing from David Brown, who is a Senior Vice President of Federal Government Affairs and Public Policy for Constellation Energy Corporation, the nation's largest provider of carbon-free electricity. David has been with Constellation and its predecessors since 1990 and serves as Constellation's primary liaison with Congress and federal agencies. David is a graduate of Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia and received a Juris Doctor degree with honors from the Georgetown University Law Center. And then rounding out our panel, we will have Bill Orders from NRC. He serves as a reactor policy advisor for Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Chairman Diaz, Chairman Klein, Commissioner Magwood, and current Commissioner Caputo. Has served as Chief of Staff for Commissioner Klein as well. Bill also has worked as a senior project or program manager in NRC's Japan Lessons Learned Division, the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation, Office of New Reactors, and Office of Nuclear Security and Incident Response. Bill is also a subject matter expert on power uprates, and that's why he joins us here. So let's get going with our presentations. We'll turn first to Chris from EPRI. Chris?
Oh, Chris, we can't hear you right now.
How about now?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alyse. We're just going to jump right into it. We want to give you as much time for Q&A as possible, so I'll be moving quickly through these slides. Next slide, please. We wanted to start off by just doing a little review on what a power uprate is. And a power uprate is where we increase the original licensed power level, thermal power level of a nuclear reactor. Now that's different than uprating, say, the electrical, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But the example is if you have a reactor that's licensed for a particular thermal power, you then uprate it. And in the case in most of the U.S. nuclear power plants around, they'll have a thermal power of around 3,000 megawatts thermal. You talk about uprating it then to say 3,500 megawatts thermal. And I use the example in electrical there, you see with the first bullet. Now, when you change the licensed thermal power level, that requires NRC approval. And William will be talking about that in a little bit. We wanted to bring you up to speed a little bit about the different types of uprates that have historically been performed. And there's three historically, the first being a measurement uncertainty recapture. Now, this is a small uprate, 1 to 1.7%, and it involves just upgrading instrument measurement capability so that you don't have to have as much margin in your thermal power if you have more precise instrumentation. So when utilities would install this more precise instrumentation, they could gain 1 to 1.7%. And that's called, you'll hear it called an MUR, or for measurement uncertainty recapture. The next type of uprate is a stretch power uprate. And this is in the order of 2 to 7%. And it involves taking advantage of all of the initial margins that were used or that were a part of the plant. And what, as an example of this, is a plant may have been designed with an extra feed water pump. And so you have a feed water pump in standby. You could now uprate, produce more power if you used that standby pump, and it didn't require any modifications. So in these stretch, you're actually using the margins in the original design to be able to uprate the plant. And that's different from the next one, the extended power uprate, where there's usually some major modifications that are involved here. This is much more expensive uprate. It includes additional system structures and components. And historically, we went up to 20% and even a little bit greater on these extended power uprates. So those are the historical power uprates that have happened in the past. And it's all about leveraging that existing infrastructure. So when you uprate a plant, you are taking credit for already what's there, the community, all of the existing infrastructure that goes along. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you just what has been done in the past. Now, on the left-hand side, these are the boiling water reactor units in the United States. And you can see that for the most part, the majority of them have uprated from their original licensed thermal power approximately 20%. There's still a number of plants to go up there. But I would like to point out that although historically 20% was kind of our ceiling, there's no reason why we can't go even further. And so even these plants that you see that are up at the 20% level, they have the potential for even going further. Now, on the right-hand side, you have the pressurized water reactors. And you can see there's a large variety in what they've accomplished uprate-wise. And you can get a feel for the different type of uprates by looking on this right figure. You see on the right-hand side, the very low values, those are where plants did the measurement uncertainty recapture uprate. And then you have kind of that middle row, which is some of the stretch uprates, a little bit of the extended, and then the ones that are on the left are fully extended power uprate units that have uprated in the EPU type of uprate. These, I think Alyse talked about it, widely implemented since the 70s. Nearly, as I mentioned, all the US plants and 45 international units have uprated. A couple of the Sweden plants have went beyond 125% of their original licensed thermal limits. Now, I'll tell you that overall, the results have been very positive, but some plants did experience some budget, schedule, or technical issues, and those were all resolved. Bottom line, all of these uprates are driven by the business case. So that's really why you see in a lot of cases the plants on the right-hand side of their figures that haven't fully uprated. It really is dependent on the business case of that particular utility and the particular region that it's in. And I believe that David will be talking about that following me. Next slide, please. Now, so that was the past. And we think about the future. We see the urgent need for additional carbon-free energy that's driving utilities to look at power uprates again. And almost every single nuclear utility, in fact, I think I can say every U.S. nuclear utility is looking at uprating, looking at being able to get the most that they can get out of their plants safely and reliably. We're seeing a recognized increase for the value of nuclear, and there's also a realization that the existing nuclear power plants can be extended to 80-year lifetimes. And really, we're seeing that there's no reason they can't go further. We're looking at 100 years on the lifetime of the plants. But once again, and also as part of the current drive, we see the Inflation Reduction Act and other incentives that are driving an economic reason to do the power uprates. Now, one of the things that I like to make sure that we talk about when uprating the unit is there are additional benefits. And as a part of that, as we uprate these plants, we can make them better. We can increase their resiliency to climate change. We can establish a longer life cycle management strategy. We can recapture some of the margins that we may have lost during the stretch power uprates. We can eliminate vulnerabilities. And one of the things, and maybe the biggest thing, is we've proven that in the nuclear industry, we've proven that we can do massive modifications and we can do them on budget and on schedule. Now, we haven't proven that we can build new ones, but the existing ones we can modify and we can do it very, very well. So we're looking at that as bridging the gap to new nuclear. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to let you know about two products, and these are free to the public. In fact, you don't have to have an EPRI account or anything. You can take your phone right now and scan those two QR codes, and they will it'll download these two reports. These two, I would call them both primers about leveraging the existing infrastructure. On the left-hand side is really all of our existing energy infrastructure, not just nuclear. The report on the right is just nuclear. Both of these are pretty easy reads. And once again, easy downloads, free to anyone, everywhere, and worth the read. And with that, that's it for my part, Alyse.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. Thank you very much, Chris. Next, we'll turn to David from Constellation.
Great, thanks, and thank you all for your time today. Appreciate the opportunity. Just a quick commercial on Constellation. We are the nation's third largest power generator. We have generation facilities in 20 states. As you heard in the intro, we're the largest producer of carbon-free energy in the US. About 10% of all carbon-free energy that's produced in the country comes from one of our plants. That's mainly nuclear, but also wind, solar, and hydroelectric, and then we've got some natural gas assets as well. We're also the largest nuclear company in the country. We have 21 reactors that we own and operate in Illinois, New York, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And then we're part owners of 4 additional units in New Jersey and Texas. Just a quick reminder that nationally, nuclear energy accounts for about 10% of the electric generating capacity in the country. But because those plants operate around the clock, 24 hours a day, they are responsible for about 20% of the nation's overall generation mix and about half of the carbon-free electricity that is produced in the US. As Chris said, nuclear uprates really offer a unique opportunity to add more clean power because they can be added at existing plants without changing the physical footprint of the unit. They can be done faster, which is critically important these days, given challenges regarding permitting. The uprates that we're going to be talking about nationally can be done before 2030 if everything goes right. And then finally, they can be done cheaper than building new reactors, as Chris noted. So to date, about 8,000 megawatts of uprates have occurred within the US. That's the equivalent of 8 large nuclear power plants being added to the system. And the Nuclear Energy Institute estimates that there are at least 2,500 megawatts of additional power uprates that are in the queue here for the nation's existing facilities. That's the equivalent of the output from Vogtle 3 and 4 that just came online. At Constellation, we've got about 1,000 megawatts of uprates that we think we can undertake. These are projects that were previously not economic, given all the conditions that are out there. But with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and Section 45Y, which is a technology-neutral federal tax credit for all carbon-free electricity, those uprates all of a sudden are economic going forward. So that means a lot of projects at a lot of plants and a lot of jobs associated with that. To date, we've announced $800 million in uprate investments at 4 of our units. Again, we think that we've got many more in the queue. The projects that we've announced to date are about 150 megawatts of uprates, and that, again, is out of a potential universe of over 1,000 megawatts that we think we could squeeze out of our existing facilities. So, again, about the equivalent of a large power plant on the grid today. In terms of factors that affect our decisions here, obviously power prices and the ability to get a return on the investment that we make to undertake those uprates is critically important. We are in competitive markets, and so power prices that we see today may or may not last for the life of the unit. So we've got to figure that out as well and take that into consideration. We also look at potential for customer offtake contracts for the output from those uprates. We also factor in the remaining life of the plant. I think Chris referenced the fact that plants are initially licensed for 40 years. Many have already gone to 60. Some are going to go to 80. There's even some talk about 100-year life for those plants. So if the incentives that are currently in place remain in place, I think you'll see all the existing plants, or at least almost all of them, seek licenses to run for up to 80 years. That vastly improves the economics of potential power uprates. Obviously, if you've only got 5 years to recover that, it's a much different equation than if you've got 25 years to recover that investment. And then finally, state and federal tax incentives that are in place play a big role. As I mentioned, the 45Y tax credit is available to all new carbon-free power that comes on the grid after 2025. And that's where these uprates would fall. We're still waiting final guidance from the Internal Revenue Service to implement that part of the legislation. But we're optimistic that the power uprates will qualify as new carbon-free energy. So that's a little bit of our decision making and our plans, and happy to answer questions as we get into the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That's a good reminder. We will be taking questions after our last speaker. So do go ahead and, as you think of questions, start putting them in the Q&A. Before we move to our last speaker, Catherine, I understand a few folks are having some technical difficulties. Do we need to address that or let folks know of any settings they need to change?
Yeah, thanks, Alyse. Sorry, the last presenter, David, didn't have slides, so he was just a talking head, but you should be able to see the NRC power uprate slide right now. This is being recorded, so if you are having any difficulty seeing the slides, we will be distributing the PowerPoint slides as well as the recording later on. So that helps.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
I hear someone who's speaking.
It's William
Bill.
Orders.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. Hi, Bill. So that's a good segue. Our next speaker is going to be William Orders from NRC. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you so much. We had to change computers, but we're technically challenged here. Before I begin, I wish to thank you for this chance to discuss the NRC's process for reviewing nuclear power plant uprate application. Kimberly Green, a colleague of mine, will present information concerning opportunities for state officials to participate in the power uprate process. Next slide, please. As was discussed in the previous presentation, there's a great deal of interest among the licensees of operating nuclear power plants in pursuing the possibilities of applying to the NRC for an amendment to their operating license for power uprates. An industry survey on power uprates found that greater than 50% of the sites have a level of interest in implementing one or more power uprates with a combined capacity increased to 2 gigawatts. As said before, the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits, along with the Civil Nuclear Credit Program and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill of 2021 have generated a great deal of interest in power uprates. Next slide, please. The utilities have used power uprates since the late 1970s as a way to generate more electricity from their nuclear power plants. As of January 2022, the NRC has approved 171 uprates, give or take one or two, we lose count, resulting in a gain of about 24,089 megawatt thermal or 8,000 megawatt electric. That's equivalent to about 8 power plants, 8 large power plants. The NRC has established processes to support these reviews. However, historic data indicates that over time, there's an increase in the resources and time required to conduct those reviews. Given the forecast of multiple power uprate applications, the NRC is in the process of identifying opportunities to improve and optimize our reviews. Next slide, please. The process for amending commercial power plant licenses to power uprates is virtually the same as the process used for other license amendment results. The NRC project manager for the licensee requesting the uprate notifies the public in the Federal Register that the NRC is considering the application. The public has 30 days to comment on the NRC's proposed determination regarding no significant hazards consideration and 60 days to request a hearing. After completing its technical review, the NRC staff documents the findings in a safety evaluation. The project manager will consult with a state official regarding the NRC's proposed determination regarding NSH NONS, the no significant hazards consideration, and will consider any comments that the state official has. Kim Green will discuss these opportunities in her presentation. As I mentioned on next slide, please. I got one more slide, I think, Kim.
Okay.
As I mentioned on slide, where are we? Yeah, that's where I want to be. As I mentioned on slide 3, the NRC has established processes to support the review of power uprates. NRC license instruction, we call them LICs, LIC 112, revision 2, power uprate process provides generic guidance for power uprate reviews, referencing the following for specific reviews. The measurement uncertainty recapture uprates is RIS 2002-03. Uncertainty recapture power uprates RIS 2007-24 dealt with the use of Westinghouse cross flow ultrasonic flow meter implementation. Stretch uprates we'll have more stretch power uprates, but we use the results of previous stretch uprate reviews with RS001 review standard for extended power uprates for guidance. Extended power uprates, like I said, we use the review standard RS001 for extended power uprates. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Kimberly Green. Next slide.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So there are several opportunities for the states to participate in our power uprate review process. First of all, licensees are encouraged to request pre-submittal meetings prior to the submittal of their license amendment requests. And these meetings are open to the public unless there's sensitive information being presented and those portions are closed. And during those meetings, the public meetings, there is an opportunity for the public and states as well to provide comments to and ask questions of the NRC staff. And our meetings are posted to the public meetings schedule, which is on the NRC's public website. And as Bill mentioned previously, the NRC project manager will consult with the state about its proposed determination regarding the NOSIC hazards consideration, and the state can provide comments to the staff. And in parentheses there, that is the regulation that mandates that we do this. And also, there's an opportunity to comment on a draft environmental finding of no significant impact. We call that FONSI, and that's if the NRC determines that it needs to prepare one. And the regulation regarding that is in our Code of Federal Regulations there in Part 51. And also, as Bill mentioned, the state will have an opportunity to request a hearing during the 60-day comment period that was mentioned, and the regulation is cited there. That's 10 CFR Part 2. And lastly, if the ACRS, that's our Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards, they consult to the Commission. If they request a meeting, the NRC staff and applicant will participate in the meeting with the Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards. And these meetings typically open to the public unless there's sensitive information being presented. And during that meeting, there is an opportunity for members of the public and other stakeholders, such as states, to make comments. And the ACRS schedule is also posted on the NRC's public website. And you heard me mention the public in those opportunities. The public has the same opportunities for participation as the states do, except we do not have a mandate to consult with the public. We consult with the state, but we do consider any comments that are submitted by the public during the 30-day period for comment on the NOSIC hazards consideration that was previously mentioned. Next slide. Okay.
Thank you, Kim. I'm sorry. That's the last of our presentation, except if there are any questions. So other than questioning me how the computers work, that I had trouble.
You got it working eventually, so we very much appreciate your perseverance. Thank you for all of those presentations. A reminder to all of our participants, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box. While folks are formulating their questions and getting them into the Q&A box, I'll start us off with a couple of them. A question to Chris. So extreme weather events are growing in magnitude and frequency around the country. Could you share some details about what you and your colleagues at EPRI's Climate Resilience and Adaptation Initiative are looking at to help nuclear units adapt to extreme weather events, particularly heat? That's been very much in the news this year.
Yeah, great question, and thank you for that. And as Alyse and I think the question mentioned, EPRI does have a major initiative called Climate Ready, where it's not just nuclear, but really all power plants. And the type of things that we're looking at is, we first analyze, as you look at climate change, how are things really impacted? And it's primarily, well, there's a lot of ways, but primarily you're looking at the environment, the ambient air temperature, and then your ambient cooling water temperatures. Now, you also, along with climate change, have some weather-related effects, additional rain, say cold weather, additional hot weather, all kinds of things. We look at all of these variables and then assess how the...
Oh, uh-oh. We've lost you.
It looks like Chris might need to rejoin Zoom. So maybe we can put a pin in that question, ask someone else a question, and then help Chris get back on and go from there.
Okay. Oh, there he is.
Oh, here you are. Great.
Yeah, that's the second time during the broadcast where it said meeting disconnected. And so I don't know on my end or Zoom, but I'm not sure. That's okay. But anyway, yeah, EPRI and the industry as a whole are doing a lot of research and looking into how the changing climate conditions are affecting the system structures and components of the plants and how we can mitigate those issues. And, there's a lot of ways to start mitigating them, and it's all a part of that program that you mentioned.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chris. So we have received a question from Commissioner Eccles. The question is, are you seeing any difference in state interest in nuclear uprates, perhaps based regionally or on political leanings?
Maybe I can jump in with that one.
Sure.
I think that we're seeing a very supportive environment really across our footprint of folks who are interested in uprates. Again, they see it as minimally disruptive from an environmental perspective. Again, using the same footprint, time to market is very quick, and it's less expensive than building new. And it creates a lot of jobs. And so I think that economic development these days is at the top of everybody's list. And then obviously, I think everybody on this call is certainly familiar with the recent growth of projections for increased demand for electricity. So effectively getting more megawatts out of the same facility seems like a winning formula to everybody that we're talking to these days.
Thank you. And I guess a opposite corollary to that. So David, you've talked about the factors that go into deciding whether to undertake various projects. Is there anything that could prevent you from moving forward with any of your planned uprates?
Yeah, I think I touched on factors that we look at, and I think, regulatory risk, I would say, is well understood, and from our perspective, very minimal. The NRC's got a very predictable process. We know what the expectations are. We know what it's going to take to meet those. And they're very clear about what those expectations and requirements are. So I think that's a very minimal risk. Supply chain, some of the larger components are offshore, and so any disruption there would be a potential concern. But again, given the countries that we're talking about, who are the main suppliers, I think that's probably minimal. Power prices are a market risk that we have to take and deal with ourselves. And then the biggest one is really kind of the political risk involving the potential repeal of incentives. And so if 45Y, for example, were to go away for nuclear uprates, that would dramatically change the economics and would cause us to reconsider whether to go forward with a lot of these projects.
Thank you for that. We've had another question come in. Matthew Gladfelder asks, this is about concerning fuel improvements and innovation. Which uprate bucket would that fall into, and how significant of an uprate can arise from using newer fuel types? I'm not sure, Chris or David, which one of you would like to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that. And that's another great question. As far as what bucket it falls into, for needing advanced fuel, it would really fall into the extended power uprate bucket. The current fuel current fuel designs that we utilize are totally adequate for going up to the 20% level. When we look at the advanced fuels that we're talking about, and you may hear people talk about accident tolerant fuel, and extended enrichments, extended burnups, you may hear these terms. Those are the fuel related terms that are needed to go beyond 20% for a lot of the reactors that are existing today. So that's really where fuel comes into it. It's for the bigger uprates, some wanting to go to greater than 25%, for example.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. David, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay, excellent. We do have now a question for NRC from Darren Zigich. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The question is about the finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, that's created by NRC. The question is, does that look at only nuclear-related impacts or all impacts imposed by the nuclear island and the balance of plant? Example, cooling water increases.
So it looks at the impacts on the environment. So they could be radiological and non-radiological. So yes, it would include like impacts to the environment from, changes in the cooling water temperature as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Let's go to another question. So, Chris or Bill, we've heard conversations about siting new nuclear generation at existing plants. Do uprates have any impact on those discussions?
Well, I'm sure David will have something to say as well. I would tell you that it should not have any significant impact on those discussions. Where it may come in is depending on the particular region, you could have grid congestion, and being able to make sure that you have in a certain regional area not too much power. So if you're in a grid congested area, you wouldn't want to add another nuclear power plant. But that's something that can be overcome. And that's why I say that I really don't think that it will be a consideration in the discussions.
I think that's right. And I also think that's one of the benefits of uprates too, is you're not dropping in 1,000 megawatts or 1,100 megawatts of new power into an area that might already be congested. So you can do 125 megawatts or something along that line where you're getting a lot of new power out, but you're not impacting the grid.
Thank you.
And Alyse,
Oh, yep.
can I go back? I think you asked me Bridget's question, but I think you put a little bit different spin on it. I don't know if I answered what she was asking. She asked about how can we make plants more resilient to climate change? And I think you had mentioned ready, and I kind of answered with ready. But to answer Bridget's specific question, we can make these plants as we operate them, we'll make them more resilient to climate change by, for example, making the ultimate heat sink larger or adding cooling capacity as a part of the uprate. So adding larger equipment like a bigger condenser to be able to handle as climate change occurs and some of our rivers and lake temperatures increase, we're able to handle that increase. So we factor that in, we engineer it into our uprate. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that clarification, Chris. I think that provides Bridget with a fuller answer than we had before. Let's see, looking in the Q&A box, we do have another question. An anonymous attendee is asking what the biggest barriers are to performing uprates and how those challenges are being navigated. David, I think you touched on that before. Anything that you'd like to add based on this phrasing of the question?
No, I think I hit on the major ones. I think the other is just a matter of a lot of time goes into this process. I mean, it's probably about a year to prep all the material before you even submit your application to the NRC. And then they've got a process that generally takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So those processes just take the time that they're going to have to take, given constraints on person hours of work. So that's kind of the biggest factor right now, other than the issues that I discussed.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, another quick question looks like for David. Is Constellation assuming an 80 or 100-year lifespan for some or all of your plants?
We are currently at 60 at almost every plant. We're on the verge of going to 80 at another site with 2 units, and would anticipate going to 80 when the rest. I mean, they are all in a very materially good condition and think that that's possible. We are not at a point in the life of any of our plants yet where we've got to make a decision about going to 100. But what I'll tell you is, one of the great things about nuclear plants is that they run 92 to 94 or 95% of the time. And that doesn't happen by accident. It's a very intentional, deliberate process where materials are examined well in advance. Failures are anticipated. You often swap out components before they actually fail. Because you don't want to have an outage, that's unplanned. And because you keep those plants in such a materially strong condition, they are very well positioned to run for 60, 80, and hopefully even 100 years.
Okay. Thank you. And let's see. Bridget has another question. So for Constellation, you operate some of the oldest nuclear plants in the country. Are there considerations that should be taken on operating an older plant versus a newer vintage plant?
Yeah, again, I think it goes to the underlying material condition of the plant. And Chris, having been behind the steering wheel of some of these things, can give us a good view of that. But the analogy that I use with policymakers is that, this is kind of like a vintage automobile. It may have the very same exterior, but almost every component on the inside has been changed out over the lifetime of the plant or vehicle. So it's good as new in many regards. But Chris would welcome your thoughts on that.
Yeah, David, you're exactly right. And, I've been at both the brand new plants and the older plants in the Constellation system. And I was at an older plant that we uprated, and it's just, as I said in my presentation, you take the opportunity when you're uprating a plant and you're making these big modifications to really improve all aspects of it. So you're replacing some of the older stuff that is can wear out, and you're getting ahead of it so that it can run. And we've seen, the history shows that those plants, as David said, they run at a very, very high capacity factor, an unequaled in any industry type of capacity factor.
Thank you. Oh, is someone else jumping in? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So we have another question. This a little bit confirmatory here on process. It's sounds like systems that have completed uncertainty recapture or stress power uprates in the past are still eligible to do extended power uprates. Is that correct? And I guess a corollary to that would be, is there a limit to the number of uprates that a plant could pursue?
I think any one of us could answer that. Who would you like, Alyse?
Oh, well, Chris, why don't we go with you?
There is no no limit to the amount of uprates that a plant can make. There's no regulations that prohibit that, and you're absolutely right. And there are a number of plants who have done just a measurement uncertainty recapture uprate, or there are some that did a stretch power uprate and a measurement uncertainty at the same time. And there's some that did the MUR and then did the SPU and did the EPU. And there's some that just went straight to EPU. So it's there's no specific path or requirements. And it's really that it's the analysis that it comes down to. You submit to the NRC your changes and your analysis, and they review and analyze it based on that particular submittal.
Thank you. Let's see, one more question. Let's see. I guess this would be either for Chris or David. But Chris, so earlier you explained the difference between thermal output versus electric output. The heat produced usually far exceeds the electric output, usually like a ratio of 3 to 1 or so. But these plants are all 40, 50, 60 years old. Have there been technological developments that would enable recovery of any of that excess heat, either for direct electricity generation or other applications?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, I think I'll fall on the sword a little bit. Not as many as we should have made over this period of time. There have been improvements. There's better heat transfer materials that are used, so that improves the efficiency. When you think about any power plant, that's absolutely right. You lose. You're about 30% efficient in the power created to what you're actually able to deliver, and that's really through the entire process. So you have to look at all aspects of it. The turbine plays a major role in that. The turbine and the main generator play a role, as well as the nuclear side components. So we have made some great improvements. And as a matter of fact, when I struggled a little bit about trying to talk about the thermal power versus the electrical power, a lot of our plants have uprated, but without changing their thermal power license limit. They've uprated by putting in a high efficiency turbine. So for the same reactor power, they're now able to put out more electrical power. And in that kind of case, you don't need NRC approval. That's a simple component change, and you're able to produce more electricity just by putting in this new high efficiency turbine. So yeah, we have made some improvements. Our efficiencies are really very good. We have a lot of thermal programs that monitor that and maximize it. But at the end of the day, you are limited by that steam cycle in the efficiency that you can gain out of it, even if it's perfect.
Okay. Wow, that is fascinating. Thank you for that. So I think we've got one more question that we'll take, and then after that, I think we'll turn to a round robin and with the panelists and ask for your key takeaways for states. But first, let's do this last question. Mark Schreiber is asking, do the uprates affect the refueling cycle schedule? I guess that would be for either Chris or David.
Chris, you've got the expertise here, but you know, I would say in general, not necessarily. Although you can undertake some modifications to go from an 18-month to a 24-month cycle, and we've seen that at a number of plants.
Perfect answer.
Excellent. The history major comes through here in the clutch.
Excellent.
That's exactly right.
You guys tag team very well. Okay, we're coming up on the end of our time. So why don't we do a round robin with our panelists, and we'll look for your key takeaways for states. We'll do this in order that you spoke, perhaps. So Chris, I'll put you on the spot first.
Hi, thanks. I just want to once again express my appreciation for being asked to be here today. Really enjoy this topic and hope that we provided any information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I imagine our email addresses will be given to you. If not, I'll ask Alyse to do that. And the final thing I would like to say is just remember that the greatest carbon-free energy asset that we have is our existing nuclear power fleet in this country. It really is, and it has so much more it can give. So, you know, look forward to that. And and I had one more thing, but old age got the best of me.
Okay,
And
well,
it slipped out.
if you think of it before we end, you can hop in and share it with us.
Very good. Thanks again.
Yeah. So we'll turn to David. Any key takeaways that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and I'll just echo Chris's thanks for the opportunity today, and really appreciate that. Happy to be a resource if we have got a plant in your state, and frankly, even if we're not in your state, but you'd like a tour of one of our plants, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to let you come in and kick the tires. There's really no substitute for a visit to one of the sites. And again, we'll just reiterate, I mean, my key takeaway is, look, this is low-hanging fruit. You've got existing facilities that can handle this. You can get them online quicker and less expensively. And that's a hard formula to beat. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And now turning to NRC.
Let me parrot what the other two gentlemen said. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, although it was somewhat staccatic. But I'd like to turn to Kim if she'd like to make any comments about the additional opportunities for the states to get involved. Kim?
Yeah, so I would just encourage states to get involved through the various means that we mentioned today. There will be opportunities for public involvement as well. Same with the state. And just make use of those opportunities to ask the NRC staff questions and get information. And always, we have a lot of information on our public website at www.nrc.gov. And if you want to get in touch with the project managers for the plants in your state, that information can be found there as well. You might have to do some searching, but there is a section on reactors there, and you can find us. So if you please take advantage of all the opportunities that you have to, because we think that we'll probably see several applications come in for power uprates as the industry is indicating, and we would like to hear from the public and the state as well.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll round out that round robin by just offering myself up to any states where, if you are new to the idea of license amendments for nuclear power plants or power uprates, I've been around a long time and have been through this process before, and I'm happy to chat with anyone who would like to talk to me. With that, I will hand off back to Catherine to
Hey,
close us
Alyse,
out. Oh, yes.
I remembered.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention to the states is that in the last 13 or 14 years, we've closed, I believe it's 11 nuclear power plants because of economics. That was the only reason. And some of them, 3 Mile Island Unit 1, one of the best nuclear power plants ever in its performance. So these plants were perfectly fine and perfectly able to go on another 60 years. We closed them for economic reasons. In your states, if you have a plant that was shuttered recently and they haven't started decommissioning, you should be looking and pressing for those to look like they're to look into reopening. And it's going on currently in Michigan with Palisades. And I believe that Constellation is looking at they're looking at 3 Mile Island, and there's other utilities as well that are doing this. So that's something really to think about, because that would be a tremendous win for everybody. And one other last thing, I did want to do a shout out to the NRC. The NRC is doing a lot of preparatory work, getting ready for this. They're very proactive on top of things, and just really beneficial to the industry. So I wanted to get that out as well. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, absolutely. And thank you for that. That's all really excellent information. And just a big thank you to all of our speakers. I'm going to hand off to Catherine to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Alyse, for doing such a masterful job moderating this afternoon. We appreciate the insights that you bring to this with your engineering background. And likewise, thank you so much, Bill, David, and Chris, for joining us and sharing all of your vast knowledge with us here today. Kelsey, would you mind bringing up the closing slides? We have just a couple of announcements to round out the rest of this webinar. First of all, there is still time to submit an abstract if you are interested in having your panel take place during the NYSERDA annual meeting. So submissions for abstracts close on Tuesday. We just put the link for abstract submissions into the webinar chat. So if anyone has a great idea for a panel, you guys frequently do, please feel free to share that by next Tuesday. And then finally, NASIO has an upcoming annual meeting that will be taking place September 29th to October 2nd in New York. Registration is available on the NASIO website, where we have the link here. And there will be a nuclear session tentatively scheduled for September 30th at 10:30 a.m. So nuclear enthusiasts, we hope you are able to join NASIO. And I think with that, we will close it out. For more information on the ANSC, please visit the New York website. We've got some great resources available, some publications, a tracker, things like that. So lots of opportunities to learn more. All right. Thank you so much and have a lovely afternoon all.
Bye, everyone.